Welcome to a new episode of the Lead the Future, Change the Conversation podcast, an unedited, honest conversation to create the future. I'm Arjan Visser, your host and futurist, and join me if I chat with my friend Chris Harding on self-leadership, peers, and future. Chris is the founder of InspiredCEOs, an advisor to business owners who already work on leadership strategy and long for long-term success in life, business, and society. Chris, welcome back on the podcast.
Great to be here, Arjan.
Yes, I really enjoyed our last time. We had a lot of interaction with listeners, which will happen again based on our new conversation. So let's jump in immediately and ask you the nasty question. What does self-leadership mean for you?
Well, Arjan, I've been listening to some of your podcasts, and that concept has kind of wormed its way into my mind to try and make sense of that. And I mean, I am who I am. And so what I did was I broke it down into two different things, right? Self and leadership. And I was really intrigued to discover that the old English word for leadership, leidere, I mean, you kind of need to have a Gallic accent to probably pronounce it correctly. But in one sense, it's talking about guiding other people into something. Like if nobody's following you, you're not leading.
Yeah.
And that even applies to yourself, right? Would you,
Yes.
I heard on one of your other guests say, would you follow yourself? But anyway, there's another dimension to it, which is about bringing forth into reality some possibility that is not yet reality. And as I was thinking about that, I was thinking, well, that's really interesting, because everything that we take for granted today as being the real world at one point was not the real world, and yet it was possible by definition.
That's a deep thought. Well,
It was already there available.
Yes.
We just hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
And when I was listening to someone today, it just popped up on my feed. I can't remember the guy's name, talking about the next iteration of AI and Alexa will be, or Siri, hey Siri, I've got, my son's got, I don't know, 5 teenagers coming over for a sleepover. One of them's vegan, one's vegetarian, 2 are really problematic. I don't know what to feed them. I've got a budget of $100. I also want to give them breakfast. Please, could you order something for me from Sainsbury's and send it to my home? Yeah. Like I won't even have to think or work anything out, which is kind of scary. But anyway, but that possibility, my granddad could never have imagined that. He could never have conceptualized it. Impossible. And yet, that potentiality has always been possible.
Yeah.
If only we would walk forward to discover it and bring it into reality. So leadership as like new territory that you get to bring into reality. Yeah, that was where I got to on the leadership thing, which I found really exciting.
It is. Yeah. And like what you said, your granddad would probably never imagined this. And that's why it was for him seemed to be impossible.
Yeah.
Because
that's why we have the phrase the real world, right?
Yeah. And he didn't think about it, which is at the same time, which was the danger back then, not to think for yourself.
Yeah.
And with AI, we still have the same challenge. We have to think for ourselves. So in a way, both the creative physical representation was always possible. And people probably will on a micro level say, no, we needed this and we needed this. But it was there, it was out there in the future coming towards us.
Yeah. And not in a fatalistic way.
And no.
Almost in a co-creative way, right? we
Yeah.
would have to cooperate with that possibility in order for it to become real.
So to get the leadership point out of what you said, it was that going forth and create, and
Yeah,
the possibility was always there, but
yeah.
our development as leaders, iteration on iteration, prepared us to co-create, to that example you just gave.
Yeah. So look, I started work in an environment where, you know, the whole Six Sigma continuous improvement,
Hmm.
where if you conceptualize it, life looks like a staircase of, you know, everything in incremental improvements, building on what we already have, is like, and it eventually gets to what, perfection, completion? I don't know. And yet, probably the most inspiring people on the planet today are the ones who, what we call thinking out of the box, imagine ideas, and we wonder, how did they do that?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you how they did it. Their mind, I'm not talking about their brain, that's just physiology. Their mind, their map of reality is so much richer, with
Mhm.
so many more dimensions in play. They're able to realize things that other people can't realize because they haven't done the work to grow their mind, which really gets to me, which was the other bit of the self-leadership thing. What do we mean by self? And the way I conceptualize it is, well, obviously there's a physical me, living in a physical world, and I know there's a mind me, which is not about my brain. The brain is just the hardware.
Yeah.
But the software, the mind of how much sense have I made of reality? You know, how much have I? And the interesting that you first have to conceptualize it. You have to find language for it before it could ever become a real thing. You've got to be able to see it. Then you've got to be able to put words to it. Otherwise, how would you ever talk about it? And then you've got to maybe even draw it. I draw a lot of stuff to try and make sense of things. What's the relationship between this and that? How do you put it together? And yeah, I mean, and I even think there's another dimension of me. Maybe it's my age that it's become more relevant to me. Is that I think I am spirit as well. There's another dimension to me, which is the me that finds meaning in those things, that relates to those things, that finds value in those things. So it's really complex.
It is, but just to make it, well, I'm not speaking out the ambition to make it simple. But what stands out to me, what thought you trigger, is that if leadership is if one side is measured on you need to be followed, and the other side was about the bringing forth these creating creative new things.
Yeah, new worlds, if you like, new realities.
Yeah, but I think the gap is there that so many people just follow, and that's where I think the self comes in. You can't just follow, like that example about AI. Majority of people were going to use those kind of things, but if Steve Jobs was still alive, he probably would be part of the invention, and he would say, but my kids won't use it, you
Right.
know. Like that he said about the iPad.
Yeah.
And the main reason was to keep their spirit open and self, so they will keep be leading themselves and bring forth new things. So there is the balance, the bias, the trade-off in when do you follow, when do you lead, and I think that comes together in self.
Yeah, and look, I don't want to make it even more complicated.
I try
But
to make it simple, but
yeah. So I grew up in a world where, you know, Maslow's hierarchy is the frame of understanding what life is about, right? Maybe eventually you get to self-actualization if you can manage all the stuff down here on the ground floor. And I think what I've realized is that the me that wants to manage everything and control everything and everything to be safe and secure and easy, psychologists would say that's my ego. It's the acquired me. It's the formatted me. It's the me that is, it's almost like, you know, if my brain is the hardware and my mind is the software, then it's the keyboard. The one that wants to determine what comes up on the screen, right? You know, how I'm presented. But I think there's another more richer idea of an integrated me. And I don't think we found a better word than soul, like the real me. You know, when I've explored things like spiral dynamics and other such models, you know, if you're stuck at ground floor, it's life happens to me. But if you can elevate your thinking, life happens by me. If you can go a bit further, life happens through me, as me. And if you really want to discover the richest idea about life itself, it's that life happens for me. My body, mind, and spirit are all a servant to the me that I'm becoming. And therefore, self-leadership is about the commitment to take that responsibility seriously of living my best me.
What I hear you say, you mentioned Maslow, where self-actualization or transcendence is the cherry on the pie, you know. It is I think he didn't draw a pyramid at all, but he drew a sailing boat, and it was the banner on top.
Okay.
But the banner on the top, the fascinating thing is, being a sailor, you use that to navigate on the wind.
Right.
And that is an interesting thing, because when we talk about spirit and soul, you know, we tend to talk about the wind too. But what I hear you say, you flipped it, and you don't install all these conditions in your life to be met first before you start working on self-actualization.
No, if it was a pyramid, I'd flip it the other way up.
Exactly. Which brings me, using the word, you're not working with conditions, you also try to resist preconditioned thinking.
Absolutely.
That we talked about a few minutes ago. So it's not about conditions. It's not about preconditioned thinking. It is about the soul. It's about the wind, in that sense, for self-actualization. So what did you discover in your, call it, journey? Like, life is happening for me, or the future is happening for me. In that journey, did you discover that self-leadership for you is all about, even if you have to stretch for it because it's still ahead?
I'll be honest with you, it's something I still haven't got the perfect metaphor for, right? So is life a journey? Is it a process? Is it a puzzle? Is it a game? Is it a dance? Is it a symphony? I don't know. I think the best teachers who've ever lived have often started by saying it's a bit like a puzzle. It's a bit like a journey. It's a bit like because it's multidimensional, right? So there's a part of me, the ego me, that wants it all to be simple and straightforward and in boxes and very well defined. It's a bit like the people who thought that when they discovered the atom, they had reached the bottom. And then they realized, oh my gosh, it's way more weird than that. And the deeper you go, the answer to most questions is it depends. And therefore, so I try not to use the idea of life is a journey, because that suggests a destination. And I try not to use life as a game, because that suggests I have to win. Life is definitely multidimensional. And I think the invitation is to transform. One of the lovely metaphors I like at the moment is the idea that an acorn can become a 20-meter oak tree. But first, it has to fall into the ground, and it can feel that way, like you're navigating in the dark. The casing has to split open, like the ego has to be surrendered. The need for control, the need for give me a linear path, give me the secret, give me the formula. You have to let go of that. But everything, all the potentiality of that oak tree is contained inside that little acorn. It's quite phenomenal if you pause to think about it. And everything that I am and can be, it's like that. It's a similar kind of unfolding. And I think that's why it's self-leadership. Yeah. Am I actually going to take that seriously and pay attention to all of those dimensions of me? Or am I going to say, no, that's just too hard?
Yeah. Well, you made a side note, like, say, it's not about the destination. That's an interesting statement, because there are not small groups who talk about destination, destiny a lot.
Yeah.
If we make the destination a physical place or a role, then I agree with you. If we make it, like you said, if it's all about the soul, then the destination or the goal or whatever, or the end, is actually the fullest version of who I am in relationship with the people around me. Relationship inside out, but also the outside relationships. And in that sense, for the soul, I think it is a journey. But we tend to flatten it to a physical place of a certain role or a position, or but those are actually then life becomes a game, because then you measure success by what measure.
Yeah, and look, that feels somehow easier, because it then means I can frame my life in terms of what I already know and understand, rather than the possibility that there's more to be discovered than I already understand. So Albert Einstein is one of my heroes, right? Albert Einstein, most people would say he was one of the cleverest people who's ever lived. But he said of himself, I'm not cleverer than anybody else. All I do is contemplate the problem a lot longer.
Yeah.
To ask what's really going on here.
Yeah.
What are all the pieces in play? How do they relate? How do they behave? What might be possible if I could put those pieces together in a different way? Yeah, it's not about intelligence. It's about curiosity and courage. And
well, it's that what you mentioned earlier, like, life is not happening to me. So it's not the why question. Why is this happening to me?
Yeah, good.
But it is, life is happening for me. So what is really going on? I want to understand, dig deeper into what is coming to me, and make use of the potential, the benefits, the new creative edge that is at hand.
Yeah, look, one of the, and I can't remember where I found it. I wish I could. But one of the most profound insights I ever heard was from an Eastern philosophy, where this guy said, most of us are living in a when-then paradigm. When this happens, then it'll be better, be perfect, be complete. And he said it, and it looks a bit like this. You do this to get or have that, and then you will be successful, complete, whole.
Yeah.
And I think some of the richest teaching that has ever been recorded says, no, you have to flip that around. Let's start with the idea that you are a human being with infinite potential. And how do I know it's infinite potential? Because if you do it the way the word wants you to do it, it looks like this. If I do the right thing at the right time, in the right order, in the right way, with the right skills to get the right outcome for the right reason, well, there's 7 different dimensions there, which means you end up with 4,000 ways of getting it wrong. Right? 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 up to 7. Right? But if you flip the thing of this is not do to get to be, it's I already am, like the acorn, and I'm excited to discover what I'm becoming, what I'm transforming into. But it takes work, right? And it takes a different kind of work, because it's not just downloading information, it's exploring, and it's very hard to do that alone.
In our world, a part of the real world, what you just described is not the default, because the default is like how we learned to code back at school.
Yes,
With making what if statements. So it's all about yes or no, and then continue that life is different. You just described. How do you nurture that in your self leadership? How do you nurture that you keep being curious, looking for novelty? Like it slipped in my mind that I always have a trouble with the squirrel, because the acorn is actually nearly the same word in Dutch mentioning the animal. So that
Right.
what was the lovely funny animal, the squirrel, like that curiosity, that looking for new possibilities, that adventure, novelty, taking risk. What is that's Scandinavian old video with that girl Longstock, I think it was her name in English, Pippi, who always said, never done it, I think I can do it. That attitude, how do you nurture that? Even when we get older, we have deeper desires to find that fuller version of who we are, but it's also getting smaller, the circles around us to
Look, I think there's lots of ways. I mean, I think the first thing is that all the things we're talking about are a choice, right? You don't have to think, well, I'm not born that way. It's a choice to be curious, right? And there's ways you can practice being curious. I mean, you could just go for a walk at lunchtime today and pay attention. Just look around. I mean, just stop and look at the tree for a moment. And you might say, what's the point in that? What a waste of time. What does that do for me? Nothing, except it might. You might be amazed to discover this whole microcosm of life in that one tree. Just be curious. Go and walk in nature is one good way to do it. Stop watching cat videos and start watching TED Talks. Might be another way to do it. But if you really want to, it's like I was saying, if the possibility is there, in order for it to become real, I first need to conceptualize it, then verbalize it. Otherwise, I can't communicate it and it can't become real. It's just a theory, right? So, and I find that one of the ways of doing that is to be in a room with other like-minded people who are also serious about becoming their very best selves and exploring ways of articulating that, expressing it, discovering it. It's those aha moments. Where do the aha moments come from? You can't engineer them.
Yeah.
And the aha moments don't happen because this thought plus that thought equals an aha. It just reveals itself between the two thoughts, like a little bit of light. It just appears. Well, that's just a conceptualization, but I don't know how else to do that, right? It's so I would say find yourself, well, for want of a better word, a mastermind group. People in days gone by, people used to go to church. You could say that was a mastermind group, because it was getting them to think beyond the ordinary to the other dimensions of life. Most people don't go to church anymore, but we've known for generations that committing to some kind of mastermind group is the thing that makes the difference. The best phrase I heard was, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Go and put yourself in a room with people who think differently and can actually call out of you something much richer.
Yeah.
And the last thing I would say is, your ego will want to know, yeah, but what's the outcome? What's the ROI? And that's a bit like paying for an expensive restaurant and just to be able to put it on your Facebook feed of, I went to an expensive restaurant, and fail to appreciate the food and the conversation. Right?
Oh man, I think we have to land it here, because you just give too many hooks for another 4 seasons of podcast. Thank you for that. But like you said, like the aha moment sometimes just slips out of your mouth. So setting yourself up to meet with people that are maybe not like-minded, but they go after the same thing, finding out, what am I about, where am I going, what difference, what change do I carry. And so I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank the listeners for listening all to the end. And if you have questions, just connect. But if you want to experience such a peer group and find out if that peer group could be yours, to experience with language to find out what you are about and where you are going, and find your voice, then I just invite you. Use the link that is shown in the screen for the live feed. But for those who are just listening, it is businessrevivalists.com/guest, and just choose your Friday and time that you want to find out, and sit in if this is the vehicle to help you find your voice. So thank you very much for the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Arjan.
Yeah, really a lot to ponder about, but thank you very much, and definitely bring you on the show again. So take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.